The last human voice that the galaxy ever heard belonged to a woman named Sarah Chen. She was a communications officer on a small trading station at the edge of human space. Her final transmission was nothing special. She was talking to a Kathvari merchant ship about a delayed shipment of medical supplies. She complained about the coffee machine being broken. She laughed at a joke the alien captain made about human sleep habits. Then her voice stopped. The signal died and humanity went silent. That was 20,000 years ago. In the days that followed, no one thought much of it. Communication systems failed all the time. Solar flares disrupted signals. Equipment broke down. The Kathvari merchant tried to reconnect for 3 days before giving up and continuing on his route. He made a note in his log about the strain, silence, and moved on with his life. But the silence spread. One station went quiet, then another, then a whole colony, then a planet within a single rotation of the galactic standard cycle. Every human signal in the known universe had stopped. No distress calls, no emergency broadcasts, no final messages of farewell, just silence spreading like a disease through the frequencies that humans had once filled with their noise. The conquered of aligned species noticed. Within a week they had to notice. Humanity had been loud. They had been everywhere. Their ships crossed trade routes that connected 100 worlds. Their scientists worked in research stations across the galaxy. Their music played in alien bars on planets so far from Earth that the light from their home star had not yet reached those distant suns, and now they were gone. Elder Morvath, the oldest member of the Conquered Council, was the first to speak the words that everyone was thinking. He stood in the great chamber where species from across the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of importance. His ancient body was wrapped in robes that had been old when the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. The humans have vanished, he said. His voice was like wind moving through dead leaves. We must find out why. The search began. Immediately, the Kathvari sent their vastest ships. Their species had evolved on a world where survival depended on seeing threats before they arrived. Their sensor technology was the best in the galaxy. They could detect a single hydrogen atom from light years away. They could read the heat signature of a living being through solid rock. If anyone could find the humans, it was them. They found nothing. The first Kathvari expedition reached the nearest human colony in 3 weeks. The planet was called New Boston, and it had been home to 2 million humans. The Kathvari ships entered orbit and scanned the surface. They found cities intact, buildings standing, power systems still running, food sitting on tables half-feet, clothes laid out on beds as if their owners had been planning to wear them. But no humans, not one, not a single body, not a drop of blood, not a sign of struggle. The Kathvari captain, a seasoned explorer named VTH Kai, landed on the surface and walked through the empty street. The silence pressed against him like a physical weight. He had seen dead worlds before. He had walked through the ruins of civilizations that had destroyed themselves in war or been consumed by plague, but he had never seen anything like this. There was no death here. There was just absence. He entered a home at random. The door was unlocked. Inside, he found a living room with comfortable furniture. A screen on the wall displayed a frozen image from some human entertainment program. In the Kitchen, a pot of something sat on a cold heating element. VTHK scanner told him it was soup. It had been there for weeks, but it had not rotted. Preserving field was still active. Upstairs he found a bedroom, a child's bedroom, judging by the small bed and the toys scattered across the floor. On the pillow there was an indentation where a small head had rested. The blankets were pulled back as if the child had just gotten up. VTHK stood in that room for a long time. He thought about his own children waiting for him. Back home, he thought about how he would feel if he came home to find them gone. Without a trace, he left the house and returned to his ship. In his report to the Concord, he wrote, "There is no explanation for what happened here. The humans did not die, they did not fight. They did not flee in ships we could track, they simply stopped being here. I do not know how this is possible. I do not know if I want to know." Morvathy sent their own expedition. Next, they were the oldest species in the Concord. Their records went back further than any other civilization. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched young species take their first steps into space and old species fade into extinction. If anyone could recognize what had happened to humanity, it was them. The Morvathy expedition was led by a historian named Silith. She was young by her species standards, only 4,000 years old, but she had spent her entire life studying the patterns of civilizations. She knew how species lived and how they died. She took her ship to Earth itself. The human home world was a blue and green jewel hanging in the darkness of space. From orbit it looked peaceful, beautiful. Even the Morvathy had always found Earth strangely attractive, though they could not explain why. Perhaps it was because humans themselves had been strangely attractive, not physically. Of course, humans were small and fragile and lived such short lives, but there was something about them, a fire, a hunger, a refusal to accept the universe as it was. Silith landed outside a human city called New York. The towers rose around her like the bones of some great beast. She walked through streets that should have been filled with millions of humans rushing about their busy lives. Instead, there was only silence and the sound of wind moving through empty canyons of glass and steel. She found a library. Humans loved their libraries. They stored their knowledge in physical form, preserving it against the possibility of technological failure. Silith thought this was wise. Her own species had lost entire branches of their history when data storage systems had failed millions of years ago. Inside the library she found books, millions of them. She did not have time to read them all, but she scanned their contents into her ship's computer. History, science, philosophy, art, the entire record of human existence preserved in paper and ink. She also found something else in a reading room on the top floor. She found a note. It was handwritten, which was unusual. Humans had stopped writing by hand centuries before their disappearance, but someone had taken a pen and paper and written a message. The note said, "We are sorry. There was no other way. Remember us." That was all. No explanation, no details, just an apology and a request for memory. Silith took the note back to the Concord. She presented it to the council along with her findings. The note raised more questions than it answered. Sorry for what? No other way. To do what? What were they asking to be remembered for? The Concord debated. For years, theories multiplied like bacteria in a warm solution. some said. The humans had destroyed themselves. Their technology had grown too powerful, and they had accidentally wiped themselves from existence, others said. They had been attacked by some unknown enemy, an enemy so powerful that it could make an entire species vanish without a trace. Some suggested that the humans had transcended. They had evolved beyond physical form, becoming beings of pure energy or thought. They had left the material universe behind for something greater. This theory was popular among the more mystical species. It fit with their beliefs about the nature of existence and the ultimate fate of all intelligent life, but the Morvathi did not believe any of these theories. Silith spent the next 3,000 years studying everything the library had given her. She learned human languages, she read human books, she watched human entertainment programs and listened to human music. She tried to understand the species that had disappeared so completely. What she found disturbed her. Humans had been afraid of something. It was there, in their stories, their myths, their deepest fears. They told tales of darkness coming from the void. They imagined aliens arriving to destroy them. They wrote about the end of everything, the death of stars, the final silence of the universe. They were a species haunted by the knowledge of their own mortality, not just as individuals, but as a civilization. And in the final years before their disappearance, something had changed. Their scientific papers became more focused, their military spending increased dramatically. Their governments began working together in ways they never had before. It was as if they had seen something coming and were preparing to face it. But what? Silith found no answer in their records. Whatever they had discovered, they had kept it secret, even from their closest allies. The Vrex swarm had their own theory. The Vex were not like other species. They did not think as individuals. They were a collective intelligence, billions of minds linked together into a single vast consciousness. They experienced the universe differently than solitary beings. The Vex believed that humanity had been harvested. In the deep history of the galaxy, there were stories of ancient powers that fed on civilizations, not physically. They did not eat flesh or consume resources. They fed on something else, potential, perhaps, or consciousness, or the unique pattern that each species created in the fabric of reality. The Vex had encountered traces of these powers in their long journey across the stars, old wounds in space-time, places where the universe felt thin and wrong. They believed that one of these powers had found humanity and taken them, devoured them whole, leaving nothing behind but empty buildings and cold soup on stoves. The conquered rejected this theory. It was too frightening to accept. If such powers existed, then no species was safe. The Vex could be next, or the Morvathi, or any of the thousands of civilizations that made up the galactic community. Better to believe that humanity had destroyed themselves. Better to believe it was their own fault. That way the other species could tell themselves that they were safe, that they would never make the same mistakes. Centuries passed, then millennia. The Scytherin collective, a younger species, hungry for expansion, moved into the territory that humanity had once occupied. They claimed the empty planets. They rebuilt the silent stations. They made human space their own. They found the technology the humans had left behind. Most of it was understandable, faster than light. Drives, energy weapons, medical devices. The Scythians incorporated these discoveries into their own civilization and became more powerful, but some of what they found made no sense. Machines that seemed to fold space in impossible ways, devices that manipulated matter at a level the Scythians could not comprehend, equations that described phenomena no scientist had ever observed. The Scythians locked these mysteries away in research facilities and tried to understand them. They failed. After thousands of years of study, they were no closer to grasping what the humans had been working on. 10,000 years after humanity's disappearance, a Scythian researcher named Vorith made a disturbing discovery. She had been studying one of the mysterious devices, trying to map its energy patterns. When she finally succeeded in activating it, she found herself looking at something that should not exist, a window, not a physical window, but a window in reality itself. Through it she could see somewhere else, not another place in the galaxy, not another dimension, something else entirely, a somewhere that did not follow the rules of the universe. She knew she saw movement in that somewhere, shapes that might have been beings, activity that might have been civilization. And then just for a moment she saw something looking back at her. Vorith shut down the device immediately. She locked it away and classified her research at the highest level. She never told anyone exactly what she had seen through that window, but she did make one note in her private journal. Humans did not disappear, she wrote. They left, they went somewhere else, and I think I know why. She never explained what she meant. She died 300 years later, her secrets buried with her, but she had set something in motion that would not stop. 20,000 years after humanity's disappearance, their memory had faded to almost nothing. Young species had never known them. Old species had stopped talking about them. The human language was dead. Human music was forgotten. Human art gathered dust in archives that no one visited. Humanity had become a ghost story, a cautionary tale that parents told their children, a reminder that even the bold could disappear, even the loud could be silenced. The universe did not care about dreams or ambitions or potential. It took what it wanted and left nothing behind. The galaxy had moved on, but out in the darkness, beyond the edge of known space, something was waiting. It had been waiting for 20,000 years. It had been preparing, and now finally it was ready. The silence was about to end. In the void margin, the emptiest stretch of space in the known universe, something began to move. It was massive, beyond comprehension. It was dark beyond darkness. It was old beyond age, and it was coming home. The ghost ship emerged from the void. It crossed the barrier between wherever it had been and the space that normal beings inhabited. It sent no signals. It made no announcements. It simply appeared like a memory returning to a mind that had tried to forget. On a conquered monitoring station at the edge of civilized space, a young technician noticed an anomaly on her screens. She called her supervisor. He called his superior. Within hours, the news had reached the highest levels of the galactic government. Something was coming out of the darkness. Something old, something human. The silence was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Kethos had served the conquered of aligned species for 300 years. He had negotiated peace, treaties between warring civilizations. He had mediated disputes that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. He had seen wonders and horrors that would fill 1,000 lifetimes of stories, but he had never seen anything like the ship that appeared on his view screen that morning. It emerged from the void margin, like a mountain rising from the sea. Sensors struggled to measure its size. The first readings came back corrupted. The second readings came back impossible. The third readings came back with a simple message: the ship was larger than any vessel ever recorded in galactic history. Cathos stood on the bridge of his diplomatic cruiser, the Harmony of Understanding, and watched the anomaly grow larger as they approached. His second in command, a young Morvathi named Sileth the Younger, named for the famous historian, stood beside him. Her ancient face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. The sensors cannot determine its composition, she said. The whole material does not match anything in our databases. It absorbs nearly all electromagnetic radiation. It should be invisible to us, but somehow we can see it. Kios nodded slowly. He had noticed the same thing. The ship was darker than the space around it. It was a hole in the stars, a wound in the fabric of reality. Looking at it made his eyes hurt in ways he could not explain. Has it responded to our hails? He asked. No, Ambassador. We have transmit greetings in 7,000 languages. We have sent mathematical sequences. We have broadcast images of peaceful intent. Ship has not acknowledged any of our attempts at communication. Cathos thought about this for a long moment. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic work, he had never encountered a species that refused to communicate. Even the most hostile civilizations would eventually respond, if only to threaten or demand. Silence was the most unsettling response of all. What do the archives say? He asked. Sileth's ancestor spent her life studying humanity. Is there any record of ships like this? Sileth the Younger closed her eyes and accessed the vast repository of knowledge that her people had accumulated over millions of years. When she opened them again, her face had gone pale. There is no exact match, she said, but there are references in the oldest human records to theoretical designs. Ships that could fold space around themselves, ships that could exist in multiple dimensions at once, ships that could, she paused as if the words were difficult to say, ships that could survive anything, even the death of the universe itself. Cathos felt a chill run through his body. The Kthvari were not a species prone to fear. Their home world had been a dangerous place full of predators and natural disasters. They had evolved to face threats head-on, to analyze dangers, and respond with calm precision. But this was different. This was something outside his experience, outside the experience of anyone alive. The Council has ordered us to make contact, he said. We will proceed. The Harmony of Understanding approached the ghost ship. Slowly, as they drew closer, details began to emerge from the darkness. The hall was not smooth as it had first appeared. It was covered in patterns, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change as Cathos watched them, lines that led nowhere and everywhere at once, symbols that his brain refused to process. I cannot look at it directly, Sileth admitted. The patterns, they hurt to see. Kios understood. He was having the same problem. The ship was designed to confuse observers, to prevent them from understanding what they were, seeing it was a defensive mechanism. Perhaps it was something else entirely. They reached a distance of 10 km and stopped at this range. The ship filled their entire viewscreen. Kethos felt like an insect standing before a mountain. The scale was beyond comprehension. Transmit another greeting, he ordered. Use the oldest human language in our archives. The communications officer, a Scytherin named Vorith, worked her console. She sent a message in ancient English, the tongue that humanity had spoken before. They developed universal translators. It was a simple message: we come in peace. We wish to communicate, please respond. For a long moment, nothing happened. The ship hung in space like a sleeping giant. Keith was about to order another transmission when the view screen flickered. A light appeared on the hull of the ghost ship, a single point of brightness in all that darkness. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it began to move, tracing a path across the ship's surface. It drew a shape, a simple shape, a circle, Silath said. In human mathematics, a circle represents completion, unity, the absence of edges, or zero. Vorith added the beginning of counting, the empty set, nothing and everything at once. The light continued to move. It drew more shapes, a triangle, a square, a pentagon. It was demonstrating mathematical understanding, proving that there was intelligence behind the darkness. Then it drew something else, a human figure. The light traced the outline of a body, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. It was crude, like a child's drawing, but there was no mistaking what it represented. There were humans on that ship, or something that remembered being human. They are inviting us aboard, Kath said. He was not sure how he knew this, but he was certain it was true. The drawing was a message: we are here, we remember what we were, come and see what we have become. Ambassador, Vorith said, protocol requires us to wait for authorization from the council before the council sent us here to make contact. Keith interrupted. We will make contact. He assembled a team of 12, himself, Silath, the younger Vorith, 3 Kithvari, scientists with equipment to analyze whatever they found, 2 Morvathi, historians to document everything, 3 V-Rex drones, extensions of the swarms, collective consciousness, providing a perspective that individual minds could not achieve, and 1 Slytherin soldier, just in case. They boarded a shuttle and crossed the void between the ships. Ghost ship grew larger with every passing second. Soon it blocked out the stars entirely. There was only the ship and the shuttle and the darkness between them. I am detecting an opening in the hull, one of the scientists reported. A door. It was not there a moment ago. Kathos saw it on the viewscreen. Rectangle of light had appeared in the ship's surface, an entrance, an invitation. Take us in, he ordered. The shuttle passed through the opening and entered the ghost ship. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything changed. The shuttle's instruments went haywire. Screens displayed impossible readings. Gravity fluctuated wildly, pressing them into their seats one moment and lifting them from their chairs the next. The walls of the hangar around them seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in slow rhythmic pulses. What is happening? Vorith demanded. The ship is alive, one of the Vex drones said. Its voice was calm, almost meditative, or something like alive. It is not a machine in any way we understand. It is A place, a somewhere that exists, according to its own rules. The shuttle settled onto a surface that might have been a floor, the gravity stabilized, though it felt slightly wrong, as if it was coming from the wrong direction. The door of the shuttle opened and air flowed in, the Kethvari. Scientists analyzed it immediately. Breathable, one of them reported. Nitrogen, oxygen, trace elements, it matches the standard human atmosphere. From their records, but there is something else. A component our instruments cannot identify. Kyo stepped out of the shuttle. The hangar around them was vast, large, enough to hold a small fleet. The walls were the same dark material as the ship's hull, but here they were covered in lights, thousands of tiny points of illumination arranged in patterns that might have been decorative or might have been functional or might have been something else entirely. Which way? Sileth asked. Before Kethos could answer, the lights began to move. They flowed across the walls like water, coming together to form a line, a path. A guide. We follow the lights, Kyo said. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch and compress as they moved. The geometry was wrong. Kyo's knew that they were walking in a straight line, but somehow they turned corners. That did not exist. They climbed stairs that led down. They passed through doors that opened before them and closed behind them with sounds like whispers. The Vex drone stopped at one point. Their collective attention focused on something the others could not see. There are minds here, the drone said. Many minds. They are not speaking, but they are present, watching, waiting. Human minds? Kethos asked. Something that was human once, something that is more than human now, and less perhaps. Different, changed by time and intention. They continued walking. The corridors grew wider, the ceilings grew higher. The lights became brighter. And then, without warning, they emerged into a chamber that stole the breath from every being present. It was a garden, not a garden in the way that Kethos understood the word, not a collection of plants arranged for beauty or food. This was something else. Trees grew from walls at impossible angles. Flowers bloomed in colors that had no names. Water flowed upward into pools that hung suspended in the air. Creatures that might have been birds or might have been something else entirely flew through a sky that existed only inside this chamber. And in the center of it all there was a woman. She sat in a chair that seemed to be grown from the living material of the ship itself, vines wrapped around her arms and legs pulsing with faint light. Her eyes were closed, but Kethos knew that she was aware of them. He could feel her attention like heat from a fire. She was human, or she had been human once. Her form was still recognizably the same as the figures in the old records. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, skin that was pale and smooth, hair that was dark and long. But there was something different about her, something that his eyes could not quite capture. She seemed to exist more fully than anything else in the room. She was realer than real, more present than present. Looking at her was like looking at the source of light itself. Her eyes opened. They were not human eyes. They were too deep, too vast, too full of knowledge and time and experience. Looking into them, Kethos felt like he was falling into an ocean of stars. You came sooner than we expected, she said. Her voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies Kethos had not known existed. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. But that is fine. We are ready now. Kyo's tried to speak. His mouth was dry. His mind was blank. 300 years of diplomatic training, and he could not find words to address this being who had once been human. Who are you? He finally managed. What are you? The woman smiled. It was a human expression, but it did not reach her eyes. Those eyes were too old for smiling. My name is Elena, she said. I was born on Earth in a city called Madrid 800 years before my species left this galaxy. I remember the taste of oranges from my mother's garden. I remember the sound of rain on a tile roof. I remember being young and afraid and hopeful. She paused, and something like sadness crossed her face. I also remember 20,000 years of work, 20,000 years of preparation, 20,000 years of watching and waiting and hoping that this moment would come. What moment? Sileth asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. What have you been waiting for? Elena looked at the Morvathi historian. There was recognition in her eyes. You are descended from Sileth the Elder, the one who found my note in the library. I wrote that note for her. I knew she would find it. I knew she would spend her life trying to understand. My ancestor died without answers, Sileth the younger said. She never knew what happened to humanity. No, Elena agreed. She did not. And I am sorry for that. We wanted to explain. We wanted to tell everyone what we had discovered, but there was no time, and even if there had been time, we were afraid that the truth would cause panic, afraid that the wrong beings would learn what we knew, afraid that our enemies would find us before we were ready. Ready for what? Kyo asked. Again, what have you been preparing for? Elena stood. The vines that connected her to the chair released her gently. Withdrawing into the material of the ship, she walked toward the delegation from the Concord, and with each step, she seemed to become more solid, more present, more real, ready to explain. She said, ready to warn, ready to offer you a choice that we were never given. She stopped directly in front of Kethos. She was shorter than him, her head barely reaching his chest, but somehow he felt like she was looking down at him from a great height. 20,000 years ago, humanity discovered something terrible, something that changed everything we thought we knew about the universe, something that forced us to make a decision that haunts us to this day. She reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was warm, human warm, and yet beneath that warmth he could feel something else, something vast, something powerful, something that had been forged in the fires of 20 millennia of evolution and engineering. We discovered that the universe is not alone, Elena said, and we discovered what lives in the dark between the stars. Kethos felt his blood run cold. What lives there? He asked. Elena's eyes met his, and in their depths he saw something that would change his life forever. Horror, she said simply. Horror beyond your worst nightmares. Horror that has consumed more galaxies than there are stars in your sky. Horror that is coming here. Horror that will be here soon. She released his hand and stepped back. We left to prepare for its arrival. We have spent 20,000 years building weapons, developing defenses, evolving ourselves into something that might survive the coming darkness, and now we have returned to give you the same choice we made. What choice? Kyo asked. Elena's expression was unreadable, part sadness, part determination, part something else that he could not name. Fight, she said, or die. Those are the only options. There is no running. There is no hiding. There is no negotiating with what is coming. You fight or you die, and if you choose to fight, we will show you how. The chamber was silent. The alien garden rustled in a wind that came from nowhere. The creatures that might have been birds sang songs in frequencies that only some of the delegation could hear. Why should we believe you? Vorith demanded. The Sith soldier was the first to recover her voice. You disappeared for 20,000 years. You left us without warning, without explanation. Why should we trust anything you say? Elena turned to face her. You should not trust us, she said. You should verify everything we tell you. You should test our claims. You should doubt and question and challenge. That is what we would do in your place. That is what we did when we first learned the truth. Then show us, Cathos said. Show us this horror you speak of. Prove that it exists. Elena nodded slowly. Yes, she said. That is fair. That is necessary. You cannot prepare to fight what you do not understand. She turned and walked back toward her chair. As she moved, the walls of the chamber began to change. The garden faded, the lights dimmed, and something else appeared. Images, moving images projected onto the surfaces all around them. Images of the darkness between galaxies. Images of things moving in that darkness. Things that had no shape in every shape. Things that consumed light and matter and time itself. Cathos watched, and he felt something he had not felt in 3 centuries of diplomatic service. Fear, real fear. The kind of fear that makes you want to run and hide and pretend that you never saw what you saw. But he did not run. He stood and watched and learned, because he was an ambassador of the conquered, and his people needed to know what was coming. The galaxy needed to know, and now finally humanity had returned to tell them. The images played across the walls of the chamber for what felt like hours. Kios watched in silence, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Beside him, the other members of the delegation stood frozen, their faces reflecting the horror that unfolded before them. Elena narrated as the images moved. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, like a teacher explaining a difficult lesson to young students. But the lesson she taught was not one that any school had ever offered. It was a lesson in the true nature of the universe and the things that lurked in its darkest corners. 20,000 years ago, Elena began. Humanity was where you are now. We had spread across the stars. We had built a civilization. We were young and proud, and convinced that we understood how the universe worked. The images showed human ships crossing the galaxy. Human colonies rising on distant worlds. Human scientists making discoveries that pushed the boundaries of knowledge. It was familiar to Cathos. He had seen similar images in the historical archives. The golden age of humanity. The Morvathi called it the time when the strange, short-lived species had seemed destined to become one of the great powers of the galaxy. Then we found something, Elena continued. It was an accident. A research station on the edge of explored space picked up a signal. It was faint, so faint that our instruments almost missed it. But one scientist, a woman named Dr. Maria Santos, noticed it. She was curious. She wanted to know what it was. The images changed. They showed a small station floating in the darkness between stars. Inside, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes sat at a console, adjusting instruments, chasing a signal that danced at the edge of detection. Dr. Santos spent 3 years following that signal. It led her further and further from known space. Her colleagues thought she was wasting her time. Her funding was cut, her equipment failed. But she refused to give up. She knew somehow that what she was looking for was important. The woman on the screen grew older, her hair turned white, her face grew lined, but her eyes never lost their determination. She built better instruments from salvaged parts. She calculated trajectories by hand. When her computers broke down, she pushed further into the void than any human had gone before. Finally, she found the source of the signal. The images showed a structure floating in the darkness between galaxies. It was massive, larger than any station or ship or planet. It was also ancient. The materials were corroded by billions of years of exposure to the cold void. The design was unlike anything human science had ever conceived. It was a beacon, Alina said, left by species so old that the stars themselves had been young when they died. They had built it as a warning, a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean, hoping that someone would find it before it was too late. What did the message say? Kiyo's asked. His voice was. Alina turned to look at him. Her eyes were full of sadness. It said, something is coming. It said, we could not stop it. It said, run. The images changed again. They showed the message itself translated into human language. It was simple, direct, the words of a species facing extinction, trying to give others a chance they had never had. We are the last of the ancients. We have watched the universe for 1 billion years. We have seen 1,000 civilizations rise and fall. We have learned much, but there is one thing we could not learn. There is one enemy we could not defeat. It comes from the void between voids. It feeds on light and matter and thought. It cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be fought. It cannot be stopped. We tried everything. We failed. Now we leave this warning for those who come after. Darkness is hungry. The darkness is patient. The darkness is coming. When you hear this message, you have perhaps 30,000 years, perhaps less. Use that time wisely. Prepare, evolve, become something that can survive or do what we could not. Find a way to fight. We believe it is impossible, but we are dying, and the dying do not always see clearly. Perhaps you will find strength where we found only despair. This is our gift to you, our warning, our hope. Do not waste it. The message ended. The images faded. The chamber was silent. Sileth the younger spoke first. 1 billion years, she said. Her voice trembled. The ancients lived for 1 billion years, and they could not defeat this thing. No, Alina said. They could not. They were one of the oldest species ever to exist. They had technology that made ours look like children's toys. They understood the universe on a level that we still cannot comprehend, and they failed. Then what hope do we have? Vorith demanded. The Scythian soldier's face was pale. If beings who lived for 1 billion years could not stop it, what can we possibly do? Alina walked toward them. Her footsteps made no sound on the floor of the chamber. That is the question we asked ourselves, she said. When Dr. Santos brought her discovery back to Earth, there was panic. The governments of humanity argued for months about what to do. Some wanted to share the warning with the other species. Some wanted to hide it. Some wanted to pretend it did not exist. What did you decide? Kathos asked. Alina's expression darkened. We decided to do the math. The images returned. They showed human scientists working frantically in secret facilities. Equations covered every surface, models ran on supercomputers, data flowed like rivers between research stations across human space. We calculated how far the darkness had traveled in the time since the ancients left their warning. We estimated its speed based on the signals it emitted. We mapped its path through the galaxies it had already consumed. The images showed a map of the universe, a vast, impossibly large map, and on that map a darkness spreading like ink. Through water, galaxy after galaxy swallowed, star after star extinguished. A wave of nothing expanding in all directions. The ancients thought we had 30,000 years. They were wrong. The darkness had accelerated. It had grown stronger with each galaxy it consumed. By our calculations, we had perhaps 20,000 years before it reached us. Cathos felt sick. 20,000 years sounded like an eternity, but he knew from his studies of history how quickly time could pass. The Morvathi Empire had risen and fallen. In less time, the Kthvari had evolved from primitive hunters to a space-faring civilization in barely half that span. 20,000 years is not enough, he said. Not to develop weapons against something like that, not to prepare defenses against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations 1 billion years old. You are correct, Alina agreed. 20,000 years is not enough, not if you spend that time the way civilizations normally spend time, not if you waste centuries on wars and politics and petty disputes, not if you follow the normal path of development. She paused, and something like fire flickered in her eyes. That is why we left. The images showed humanity's final days in the galaxy, ships gathering, stations emptying, billions of people moving through space in the greatest migration in the history of intelligent life. We realized that we could not save everyone. There was not enough time. There was not enough technology. We could not build ships for all the species of the galaxy. We could not teach them all what we had learned. If we tried, we would fail. We would waste our precious years in arguments and negotiations while the darkness crept closer. So you abandon us, Vorith said. There was anger in her voice. Betrayal. Alina met her eyes without flinching. Yes, we abandoned you. We made a choice that haunts us to this day. We decided that the only way to save anyone was to save ourselves first, to take our species and disappear, to find a place where we could work without distraction, where we could evolve without interference, where we could prepare for a war that might be impossible to win. Where did you go? Silith asked. Alina gestured, and the images changed once more. They showed something that Cathos could not understand at first, a bubble, a sphere of light floating in darkness. But the darkness was not the darkness of space. It was something deeper, something more fundamental, the darkness that existed before the universe began. We created a pocket universe, Alina said, a small reality separate from this one, connected by a door that only we could open. Inside, time moved differently, faster, for every year that passed in your universe. 100 years passed in hours. Cathos stared at the images. His mind reeled. That is impossible, he said. Creating a new universe, that would require energy beyond anything you can imagine. Alina finished. Yes, it required us to consume stars. It required us to bend the laws of physics until they screamed. It required us to sacrifice things we loved, but we did it because we had no other choice. The images showed the pocket universe growing, changing inside it. Humanity transformed, cities that defied geometry, bodies that incorporated machines and biology in ways that made no distinction between the two, minds that expanded beyond the limits of individual skulls, connecting to vast networks of thought and memory. 20,000 years passed for you, Elena said. For us 2 million years passed, 2 million years of evolution, 2 million years of engineering, 2 million years of preparation, 2 million years. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Keoghs tried to imagine what a species could become in 2 million years. The humans who had left the galaxy had been young, primitive by galactic standards. They had been clever and adaptable, but they had been mortal, limited, fragile. What had 2 million years turned them into? What are you now? He asked. Elena smiled. It was a strange smile, full of knowledge and sorrow. We are still human, she said. In the ways that matter, we still love. We still hope. We still dream. We still remember where we came from and what we were. She raised her hand and light gathered around her fingers. It was not normal light. It was something else. Something that seemed to come from inside her rather than from any external source. But we are also more than human. We have merged with our technology. We have expanded our minds. We have learned to manipulate matter and energy in ways that your physics says should be impossible. The light spread from her hand, filling the chamber. Where it touched the walls, images appeared, images of what humanity had become, ships that thought, weapons that dreamed, bodies that could survive in the heart of a star or the cold between galaxies, minds that could process more information in a second than the entire conquered could in a year. We have become something new, Elena said, something that might have a chance against the darkness. Might, Vorith demanded. After 2 million years, you still only might have a chance. Elena lowered her hand. The light faded. The images disappeared. You do not understand what we are facing, she said. Her voice was heavy, tired. The darkness is not an enemy in any way you understand the word. It is not a species. It is not a force. It is not even a thing in the normal sense. Then what is it? Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. It is hunger, pure, endless hunger. It exists only to consume light, matter, energy, thought, time itself. Everything that exists, it wants to devour. Everything that might exist, it wants to prevent. That sounds like a force of nature, Silith said, like entropy, like the heat death of the universe. It is worse than that, Elena said. Entropy is passive. The heat death is an ending, but it is a peaceful ending. The darkness is active. It seeks out life. It hunts civilization. It finds the brightest lights in the cosmos and snuffs them out. One by one, she turned to face the delegation fully. Her eyes were burning with an intensity that made Keoghs want to look away, and it is aware it does not think the way we think. It does not feel the way we feel, but it knows that we exist. It knows that we resist, and it hates us for it. The chamber was cold. Keoghs felt it seeping into his bones. Despite the controlled environment of the ship, why are you telling us this? He asked. Why come back now? And GT snorts. And GT, Why not stay hidden in your pocket? Universe, until the darkness arrives. Alina's expression softened. For a moment she looked almost human again. Almost like the young woman who had been born on Earth 800 years before her. Species vanished. Because we need you, she said. 2 million years of preparation has taught us many things. One of those things is that we cannot fight alone. The darkness is too vast, too powerful. Even with everything we have built, we cannot defeat it by ourselves. But you said you left because you could not save us, Vorath pointed out. You said there was no time. There was no time then, Alina agreed, but there is time now. The darkness is still coming. It will arrive in approximately 300 years. That is not long, but it is enough. Enough for what? Alina stepped forward. She reached out and took Kethos' hands in hers. Her grip was warm and strong, enough to share what we have learned, enough to help you evolve as we evolved, enough to build an alliance that spans every species in the galaxy, enough to prepare for war. She released his hands and stepped back. We left you behind once. We will not do it again. We have come back to give you a choice. Fight with us, or face the darkness alone. Join us or die in isolation. Kethos looked at the other members of his delegation. He saw fear in their eyes, doubt, confusion, but he also saw something else, something that surprised him. Hoping they had come to the ship, expecting to find ghosts, remnants of a dead species, answers to a mystery 20,000 years old. Instead, they had found warriors, teachers, allies. They had found humanity, and humanity had returned to save the galaxy. I cannot speak for the conquered, Kethos said slowly. I do not have the authority to make decisions of this magnitude, but I can tell you this. I will carry your message to every species that will listen. I will advocate for your cause. I will fight for the alliance you propose. Alina nodded. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something else, something that looked like pain. That is all we ask, she said. Carry the message, spread the warning, let the galaxy decide. She turned and walked back toward her chair. The vines reached out to embrace her. Once more, we will wait for your answer. But do not wait too long. The darkness does not care about your politics or your disputes or your fears. It only cares about consumption. She sat down and the vines wrapped around her arms and legs. Her eyes began to close. 300 years, she said. Her voice was fading, becoming part of the whisper of the ship itself. That is all the time you have. Use it wisely. The lights in the chamber began to dim. The path that had led them here reappeared, glowing softly in the darkness. It was time to go. Kethos took one last look at the woman in the chair, at the human who had lived for 2 million years, preparing for a war that might destroy everything. Then he turned and led his delegation back toward their shuttle. They had a message to deliver, and the galaxy had a choice to make. The conquered of aligned species had never seen chaos like this. Ambassador Kethos stood at the center of the great assembly hall, surrounded by representatives from 1,000 worlds. They shouted in languages that the universal translators struggled to process. They waved appendages and flashed colors and emitted sounds that expressed emotions ranging from terror to rage to desperate hope. He had delivered Alina's message 3 days ago. Since then, the galaxy had gone mad. The humans are liars, screamed Vethar. the chief representative of the Cytherin Collective. His face was purple with fury. They disappeared for 20,000 years, and now they return with tales of monsters in the dark. This is a trick, a manipulation. They want to reclaim the territory we took from them. The Morvathi archives contain references to the threat they describe, countered Elder Morv, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. Our oldest records speak of something in the void, something hungry. We dismissed it as legend. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps you are senile, Vector shot back. Your species has spent too long buried in dusty records. You have forgotten how to see reality. The hall erupted again. Kethos closed his eyes and tried to find calm. It was difficult. Every species present had their own fears, their own agendas, their own reasons to accept or reject the warning humanity had brought. The Kthvari, his own people, were divided. Half of them wanted to accept the humans' offer immediately. The threat was real. The evidence was compelling. To refuse would be suicide. The other half were suspicious. Humanity had always been strange, unpredictable. They had left without warning once. Who was to say they would not do so again? The Vrex swarm had not sent representatives to the assembly. They never did, but they had transmitted a message that played on a loop in every Vex drone's mind. We remember the darkness. We have always remembered the humans speak truth. No one knew what that meant. No one had been brave enough to ask. Ambassador Kethos, someone shouted. He opened eyes to see a Cytherin journalist pushing through the crowd. Is it true that the human ship destroyed a Cytherin fleet? Is humanity declaring war on the collective? Kios raised his hand for silence, slowly, reluctantly. The noise died down. No one was destroyed, he said. The human ship relocated the Cytherin vessels to their home world. No crew member was harmed. It was a demonstration of capability, not an act of aggression. A demonstration of capability is a threat, Vithar bellowed. They showed us that they can move our ships wherever they want. What is that if not a preparation for war? It is a message, said a new voice. The assembly fell silent. A figure was walking through the crowd, and the representatives parted before her like water before a ship. She was humanoid in shape, wrapped in a cloak that seemed to be made of shadow. Her face was hidden beneath a hood. Elena had come to the conquered. Kethos felt his heart's beat faster. He had seen Elena before, but only in the strain environment of the ghost ship. Herein, the great hall of the conquered, she seemed even more alien, more powerful, more dangerous. She stopped at the center of the assembly, directly beside Kethos. Slowly she pushed back her hood. Her face was the same as before, young, beautiful in a human way, but her eyes had changed. They glowed with a faint light that had nothing to do with the illumination of the hall, and when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber without any apparent effort. We did not come here to fight you, she said. We came here to offer you a choice, the same choice we made 20,000 years ago, the same choice every species in this galaxy will have to make eventually. She raised her hand, and suddenly the hall was filled with images, the same images she had shown Kethos on the ship. The darkness between galaxies, the thing that consumed light and matter and thought, the warning left by a species a billion years dead. This is what is coming, Elena said. You can believe it. Or not, you can accept our help or refuse it, that is your right, we will not force you, then why relocate our ships? Vector demanded. His voice was quieter now. The images had shaken him. Despite his anger, why demonstrate your power if not to intimidate us? Elena turned to face him. Her eyes met his and he flinched. Because you sent those ships to attack us, she said, and we wanted you to understand that we could have destroyed them, we could have killed every being aboard, we could have reduced your fleet to atoms scattered across light years of space. She paused, and her expression softened slightly. But we chose not to because we do not want war, we do not want conquest. We want alliance, partnership, the chance to fight together against an enemy that will not distinguish between human and Scythian, between Kithvari and Morvathi, between Vex and Elder, to the darkness. We are all the same, we are all prey. The assembly was silent. The images continued to play across the walls and ceiling, a constant reminder of the horror that awaited them all. What do you want from us? Elder Morvath asked. His voice was calm, measured. He had lived for millions of years. He had seen species rise and fall. He understood that fear was useful only if it led to action. Elena turned to face him with something like respect. We want you to change, she said. We want you to evolve. Not slowly over millennia, but quickly. Decades and years. That is impossible, said a Kithvari scientist from the crowd. Evolution takes time, generations. We cannot simply decide to become different. You can if you have help, Elena said. We have technology that can rewrite your bodies at the molecular level. We have techniques that can expand your minds beyond their current limits. We have knowledge that will let you survive conditions that would kill you. Now she raised her hand again, and the images changed. Now they showed aliens, but not aliens as they currently existed. These were changed, enhanced bodies that incorporated machines and biology in perfect harmony, minds that linked together in networks of shared thought, eyes that could see across dimensions, hands that could manipulate forces beyond normal physics. This is what you could become, Elena said. This is what we are offering, the chance to transform yourselves into something that can fight the darkness. At what cost? Vector asked. His anger was gone now, replaced by something that might have been fear or might have been hunger. What do you want in return? Elena lowered her hand. The images faded. We want you to stop fighting each other, she said. We want you to put aside your territorial disputes and your ancient grudges and your endless competition for resources that none of you will need when the darkness arrives. We want you to work together, all of you, every species, every world, every individual. The hall erupted into murmurs. The idea was absurd, impossible. The species of the galaxy had been warring and competing and distrusting each other for millions of years. They could not simply set aside their differences because species that had been gone for 20,000 years told them to. You ask too much, representative from the collective said. It was not Vithar but a younger Scythian female, her voice calm where his had been angry. We have grudges that go back thousands of years, wars that have killed billions, wounds that will never heal. I know, Elena said. We had the same problems. Humans fought among themselves constantly. We killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We were very good at war. She walked toward the young Slytherin, her footsteps silent on the floor of the assembly hall. But we learned something. In the centuries before we left, we learned that the universe does not care about our disputes. The stars do not care who owns what territory. The void does not care about our grudges or our histories or our righteous anger. She stopped directly in front of the Sith. And representative, the only thing that matters is survival. And you cannot survive alone, none of you can, not even us. The young Slytherin met Alina's eyes. She did not flinch, though Cathos could see the effort it cost her. Why should we believe that you will help us? She asked. You left us once. You disappeared without warning, without explanation. You let us believe you were dead for 20,000 years. Why should we trust you now? Alina was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more human. You should not trust us blindly, she said. We do not deserve that. We made a choice 20,000 years ago that we have regretted every day since. We could have warned you. We could have tried to save more than just ourselves, but we were afraid. We did not think there was time. We told ourselves that we were being practical, realistic, pragmatic. She turned to address the entire assembly. But the truth is, we were cowards. We chose the easy path. We saved ourselves and left everyone else to face the darkness alone. That is not something we can undo. It is not something we can apologize away. All we can do is try to do better now. The silence in the hall was complete. Even Var had nothing to say. We are not asking you to trust us, Alina continued. We are asking you to test us, question everything we tell you, verify every claim we make, demand proof at every step. We will provide it because we need you to believe, not because we tell you to, but because you have seen the evidence for yourselves. She walked back to the center of the assembly. In 300 years, the darkness will reach this galaxy. You can spend those years fighting among yourselves, or you can spend them preparing. You can cling to your grievances, or you can build something new. The choice is yours. We will not force you. She paused, and something like a smile crossed her face. But I hope you choose to fight, because humanity did not spend 2 million years preparing for this war just to watch the galaxy die. We came back because we believe there is something worth saving here. We came back because we remember what it was like to be part of something larger than ourselves. Her eyes swept across the assembly, touching on every species, every representative, every being present. We came back because we missed you, all of you, even the ones who hate us, even the ones who fear us, even the ones who will never accept what we have become. She raised her hand one final time. This is our offer, our bargain, our hope. Take it or leave it, but decide quickly, because time is the one thing we cannot give you. The images faded completely. The hall was illuminated only by its normal lights. Alina stood alone at the center, waiting. Elder Morvath was the first to speak. The Morvathi accept, he said. His voice was clear and strong. We have lived too long to fear change. We have seen too much to doubt the darkness. We will join this alliance. There was a moment of shock, then one by one other voices rose. The Kthvari. Except, said a scientist Cathos did not recognize, but her words were echoed by others, and soon the entire Kthvari delegation was nodding in agreement. The Vex, except, came a strange multi-layered Voice from the drone scattered. Throughout the assembly, we have always known, we have always waited, now we will fight. Species after species declared their support. Some were enthusiastic, others were reluctant, but the tide had turned. The fear of the darkness outweighed the fear of change. The promise of survival outweighed the weight of ancient grudges. Finally, only the Scytherin collective remained undecided. Vector stood alone, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The young female representative stood beside him, her hand on his arm. Representative Vithar. Alina said, "You have accused us of manipulation, of lying, of threatening. Perhaps you were right, perhaps we have done all of those things." She walked toward him, stopping just out of arm's reach. But the darkness does not care about our methods, it does not care about our motives, it only cares about consumption, and when it arrives it will consume your people just as it will consume everyone else. She extended her hand. Join us, not because you trust us, not because you forgive us, but because your people deserve a chance to survive, because your children deserve to grow up in a galaxy that still exists. Vector stared at her hand for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and clasped it. "The Scytherin collective accepts," he said. His voice was rough, reluctant. But it was agreement. The hall erupted into cheers. For the first time in the history of the Conquered, every major species had agreed on something. For the first time they were united. Alina released Vithar's hand and stepped back. Her face was calm, but Kethos thought he saw tears in her glowing eyes. "Then let us begin," she said. "We have much work to do and not much time to do it." She turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before her as it had when she arrived. At the door she paused and looked back. "Thank you," she said, "all of you, for giving us a second chance." Then she was gone, vanishing into the corridor beyond. Kethos stood in the center of the assembly hall, surrounded by the representatives of 1,000 worlds. The alliance had been formed. The bargain had been struck. Now the real work would begin. 300 years to prepare for the end of everything. He only hoped it would be enough. 300 years passed like a dream. Kethos stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, the great ghost ship that had started everything, and watched the fleet assemble. 10,000 vessels hung in the darkness, their hulls glowing with lights that represented 100 different species. Kithvari destroyers flew beside Scytherin battleships. Morvathi archive ships drifted near Vrex. Bioforms enwoven through them all. Silent and dark and powerful, the human vessels waited. He was old now. 300 years of life had worn away the youthful ambassador who had first stepped aboard. This ship, his carapace was weathered. His eyes were dim, his movements were slow, but his mind was sharper than ever, enhanced by the technology that Alina had given them, expanded by the training that the humans had provided. He was not the same being he had been. None of them were. The Alliance had changed every species it touched. Bodies had been rewritten. Minds had been connected. The boundaries between individual and collective, between flesh and machine, between thought and reality, had blurred and shifted until they meant something entirely new. Alina stood beside him. She had not aged at all in 3 centuries. She looked the same as she had the day they met, young and beautiful and terribly ancient, but she had changed too, in ways that were harder to see. The burden she carried was heavier now, the weight of responsibility pressed down on her like gravity from a dying star. They are coming, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every being on the bridge. The scouts have detected them at the edge of the system. Kethos looked at the view screen. At first he saw nothing, just stars and darkness and the vast, empty spaces between. Then his enhanced eyes adjusted and he saw what the scouts had found. The darkness was moving. It did not look like a fleet. It did not look like an army. It looked like the absence of everything, a wave of nothing, spreading across the stars, swallowing light and matter wherever it touched. Planets vanished into its embrace, suns flickered and died. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear and twist as it passed. How long? Kethos asked. Hours. Alina said. Perhaps less. It moves faster when it senses prey around them. The bridge crew worked in silence. Morvathi navigators plotted courses. Cathari gunners armed weapons. Scytheran tacticians coordinated the fleet. Vex bioforms processed information at speeds no individual mind could match. And humans, changed and ancient and impossible, held everything together. This was what 300 years had built. Fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that thought and dreamed and fought with a purpose that went beyond survival. Weapons that existed in dimensions no one had known existed before the humans returned. Defenses that bent the laws of physics until they screamed, and it still might not be enough. We should have had more time, a young Scytheran officer said. Her name was Vethar's granddaughter, sir. Alliance was formed, raised in a world where humans and aliens worked side by side. She had never known the old rivalries, the ancient hatreds. To her, the alliance was simply reality. Time is always insufficient, Alina replied. We could have had 1,000,000 years and it still would not have been enough to prepare for this. She turned to face the crew. Her eyes swept across every species, every individual, every being who had chosen to be here. What we have built in 3 centuries is a miracle, she said. You have accomplished things that should have been impossible. You have changed yourselves in ways that your ancestors would not have believed. You have become something new, something beautiful, something worth saving. She paused and her voice softened. Whatever happens today, remember that. Remember that you fought. Remember that you did not surrender. Remember that you chose to stand against the darkness, even when standing seemed hopeless. The bridge was silent. Outside, the darkness crept closer, swallowing stars. One by one, all ships, Alina commanded, move to defensive positions. Prepare for engagement. The fleet began to move. 10,000 vessels, carrying billions of beings, spread across the void like a wall of light. At the center, the Remembrance held its position, a beacon of human engineering and human will. Kios watched the darkness approach. It was closer now, close enough to see the shapes that moved within it, things that had no form. In every form, things that consumed light and reflected nothing back, things that were hunger given shape. They are testing us, Alina said, reaching out with tendrils to see how we respond. On the view screen, a tendril of darkness lashed toward the edge of the fleet. A Kithvari destroyer intercepted it, firing weapons that bent space itself. The tendril recoiled, torn apart by forces it had not expected, but another tendril followed, and another, and another. The battle had begun. It was not a battle in any conventional sense. There were no tactics, no strategies, no clever maneuvers. The darkness simply attacked relentlessly, endlessly, throwing itself against the fleet in waves of nothing, and the fleet fought back, pouring energy and will and hope into weapons that burned across dimensions. Ships died. Kethos watched a Morvathi archive ship, ancient beyond measure, vanish into a wave of darkness. 1,000 years of knowledge gone in an instant. A Vex bioform large as a moon was torn apart by tendrils that reached inside it and devoured from within. But for every ship that fell, the darkness paid a price. Weapons that Elena had designed over 2 million years of preparation tore holes in the enemy. Shields that bent reality itself held against assaults that should have been irresistible, and the beings who crewed the fleet enhanced and evolved and united fought with a ferocity that the darkness had never encountered. It is confused, Elena said. There was something like wonder in her voice. It has never met resistance like this in all the galaxies it has consumed. Nothing has hurt it the way we are hurting it. Is it working? Sir asked. Are we winning? Elena's expression darkened. No, we are slowing it down. We are causing it pain, but we are not winning. It is too vast, too old, too hungry. On the view screen, the darkness continued to advance, despite everything the fleet threw against it. It crept forward inch by inch, year by year. Ships that had survived the first assault fell to the second. Defenses that had held for hours began to fail. The line was breaking. All ships, Elena commanded, fall back to secondary positions. Prepare protocol. Prometheus. Kethos felt his heart clench. Protocol. Prometheus. They had discussed it in the years before the battle. They had hoped they would never need it, but Elena had been clear. If conventional weapons failed, there was only one option left. Elena, he said, is there no other way? She looked at him. Her eyes were full of grief. There is always another way, she said. The other way is losing. The other way is watching everything we love be devoured. I prefer this. She turned back to the view screen. All ships, this is Elena. I am authorizing protocol. Prometheus, you know what this means. You know what we are asking you to do. If anyone wishes to withdraw, do so now. No one will think less of you. The fleet was silent. No ship withdrew. No being chose to flee. Very well, Elena said. Her voice was steady, but Kethos could see the tears running down her face. Begin the collapse sequence. Across the fleet, ships began to glow, not with weapons fire, but with something deeper, something more fundamental. The pocket universes that humanity had created, the refuges that held billions of beings, safe from the darkness, were being prepared for sacrifice. The pocket universes are connected to this reality through quantum bridges. Elena explained. Her voice was calm, educational, as if she were giving a lecture rather than preparing for the end. Each one contains enormous amounts of energy, enough to power civilizations for millennia. If we collapse those bridges simultaneously, the energy will be released all at once. What will happen? Sureth asked. A wound. In reality, Elena said, a tear in the fabric of existence itself. The energy release will be beyond anything the universe has ever experienced. It will destroy everything within 1,000 light years, including us, Kethos said. Including us. Elena agreed. The darkness was closer now, close enough that Kethos could feel It reaching for him, cold fingers of nothing scratching at the edges of his enhanced mind. It knew what they were. Planning, it could feel the energy. Building in the pocket universes, and, for the first time since it had begun, its endless consumption, it felt something like fear. All ships, Elena said, I want you to know that it has been an honor fighting beside you, learning from you, watching you become something more than you were. She paused, and her voice broke slightly. I came to this galaxy 20,000 years ago, afraid of what we had found, afraid of what we had to become. I left and spent 2 million years preparing for this moment. I thought I was ready. She laughed, a sound full of sorrow and joy. I was not ready. Nothing could have prepared me for this, but I would not trade it for anything. These 300 years fighting beside you, building something together, have been the best years of my very long life. On the view screen, the darkness lunged. It knew it was running out of time. It threw itself against the fleet with everything it had, tendrils of nothing, reaching for the pocket universes, trying to stop the collapse before it could begin. Ships died by the hundreds. The remembrance shuddered as darkness scraped against its hull. Kethos felt beings he had known for centuries vanish from the network that connected their minds, but the collapse sequence continued. 30 seconds, a Morvathi navigator reported. Her voice was calm, accepting. 20 seconds, 10 seconds. Elena closed her eyes. Her lips moved in a silent prayer. Kethos did not know which human deity she was praying to, perhaps all of them, perhaps none. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. Universe screamed. The pocket universes collapsed simultaneously. The quantum bridges that connected them to reality shattered, releasing energy that had been stored for millions of years. Space and time twisted. Dimensions folded in on themselves. Laws of physics pushed beyond their breaking point, simply stopped working. And the darkness burned. For 1,000,000 years it had known only hunger, only consumption, only the endless drive to devour everything that existed. It had never felt pain. It had never felt fear. It had never felt anything but the satisfaction of making more of the universe into nothing. Now it felt all of those things at once. The wound in reality spread through the darkness like fire through dry grass. It consumed the consumer. It devoured the devourer. It took the endless hunger and fed it its own poison. The darkness screamed, not with sound, because sound could not exist in the void between dimensions, but with something deeper, something that echoed through the minds of every being who had ever lived, every being who was living, every being who might ever live. It was the scream of a god dying, and then silence. Kethos opened his eyes. He was floating in darkness, not the darkness of the enemy, but the darkness of space. Normal space. Stars hung around him, distant and beautiful. He was alive. Elena, he called. His voice echoed strangely, as if he were speaking in a vast empty chamber. I am here. She appeared beside him, glowing faintly with a light that came from within her. She looked different now, more human than she had in years. Weight that she had carried for so long seemed to have lifted. We survived, Kethos said. It was not a question, but he needed to hear the confirmation. Some of us survived, Elena said. Her voice was sad. Not all. The pocket universes are gone. Billions of beings who chose not to be in the fleet are lost. The refuge we built over 2 million years has been destroyed. But the darkness, Elena smiled. It was a human smile, full of grief and joy and hope. The darkness is wounded, perhaps. Mortally, it has retreated to the void. Between galaxies trying to heal. It may recover in time, in 1,000,000 years. Perhaps or 10 million, but for now it is gone. She reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm. We one old friend. Against all odds, against all expectations, against an enemy that had never been defeated, we won. Kethos felt tears running down his face. He had not known that his enhanced body could still cry. What now? He asked. Elena looked out at the stars. The fleet was regrouping. Ships that had survived the protocol were gathering, counting their losses, celebrating their survival. 1,000 species, united by 300 years of work and sacrifice, had faced the end of everything and emerged victorious. Now we rebuild, Elena said. Now we heal. Now we remember those we lost and honor their sacrifice. She turned to face him. And now we prepare because the darkness may return in 1,000,000 years or 10 million or 100 million, and when it does, we will be ready. Kethos looked at the fleet, at the species who had learned to work together, at the humans who had returned from their long exile, at the galaxy that had survived. Will we be here, he asked, in 1,000,000 years? Elena smiled again. This time the smile reached her eyes. We will be somewhere, she said, changed perhaps, different but still fighting, still hopping, still refusing to surrender to the darkness. She squeezed his hand. That is what we do. That is what we have always done, and that is what we will always do. Around them the stars burned bright. The galaxy turned slowly on its axis. Life continued in all its strange and beautiful forms. And somewhere in the vast darkness, between galaxies, humanity kept watch, waiting, hopping, preparing, because the darkness might return. But when it did, they would be ready. They would always be ready. 10,000 years later, in a universe that had healed and grown and flourished, a young Cathari researcher discovered an anomaly at the edge of the void margin. It was a signal, faint, ancient, human. She analyzed it for weeks, trying to understand what it meant. It was not words exactly. It was more like a feeling, a memory, a promise. When she finally translated it, she sat in silence for a long time. The message said, we survived. We are out here somewhere. We remember you. We remember all of you. And if the darkness ever comes again, we will be back. She saved the signal, filed her report, and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was still watching, still waiting, still hopping, and the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, was not afraid.